Hey everybody, and welcome back to Sweatpants BI. I had a lot of really positive feedback on the last full Power BI walkthrough that I posted a few weeks ago on this YouTube channel, where I started with just a movie data set and walked you through from start to finish how to build a Power BI report from that data set. So since a lot of people seem to really respond to that, and there seems to be a pretty hungry audience for more start to finish portfolio projects and things of that nature, I decided to do another somewhat more advanced start to finish Power BI build using a really common toy company sales data set that I've seen floating around on LinkedIn that a lot of people are using to, build some portfolio pieces. And I'm going to be walking through that data set, what I would focus on. I'm going to show you how to model it and bring it into Power BI. I'm going to show you how to set up a lot of, pretty useful DAX measures around that data set. And then I'm even going to get into some more advanced applications. For example, projecting how sales are going towards actually hitting an end of year threshold. We might even get crazier than that. Anything can happen. But just like the last time I did this full Power BI build walkthrough, I'm gonna target around 3.5 to 4 hours for this build over about 4 videos, just to kind of chunk out the content, as they say. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into this toy company sales data set. So the first thing that we're going to do before we do anything else is we're just going to quickly jump into our fake sales data set and just look at the tables that we were provided. So I'm going to start by pulling up just the sales data set, which kind of acts like a fact table or primary table for this data set. So you'll notice there's not a whole lot of dimension to it. It's basically just a sale ID column that identifies all 830,000 transactions in this data set. We have a date column that runs from January 1st, 2022, all the way to September 30th, 2023. We have some sort of store ID column, which probably identifies the unique stores that sold each of these transactions. We have a product ID column that indicates what product was sold for each transaction. And we have a units column, which identifies the number of products that were sold in each transaction. And as you scroll down through here, you can see sometimes 3 items were sold, or 4 items, or 2 items, and so on and so forth. So because we have a store ID column and a product ID column, the next 2 things that I would expect to see in the data set are some sort of store dimension table that tells us a little bit more about the stores that make up the store ID column in our sales data set. And so our store dimension table here contains a little bit more information about each unique location. We have store name, store city. All of these stores appear to be in Mexico. We have a store location, letting us know whether or not these stores are located in residential areas, if they're commercial, downtown. And we have the date that the stores were opened. That's not immediately useful for what we're going to be visualizing here. I'm not immediately sure whether or not this is going to make it into our final Power BI report, but hey, it's good to have, I guess. Next, let's go open up our products table, which tells us more about the products in our sales table. So each of these product IDs is going to correspond to the product IDs over here in our sales table so that we can join those up in Power BI. And you can see the product names, you can see the product categories. This is definitely going to be useful information for us to visualize in our Power BI tool. And one thing that I'm noticing right away in this data set is that our product table contains the cost of each product and the price of each product. If you'll notice, thinking about a sales report and what we're going to try to build in Power BI, it would probably be useful to any potential business partners or stakeholders to want to know how much revenue or profit we made off of sales of these toys. Currently, in our sales fact table, all we have are the number of units sold, but not how much they were sold for or what they cost. So it's definitely going to be useful to have this information over here in our products table, and I'll show you what to do with that information once we get into Power BI and into the Power Query Editor. So let's go ahead and look at our last table, which is our inventory. And our inventory table is also, going to be a little bit difficult for us to use right away. This is a sales report, and this is more operational or supply chain type of data. So there's a slightly different flavor to this data than what we have in the other tables. We have our store ID, our product ID, and the amount of inventory on hand. So, what are we going to do with this? We'll just wait and see. I have some ideas, but now we at least know what information is in each of the 4 tables that make up our sales data set. So knowing what's in our sales data set, the next thing that I'm actually going to do is open up PowerPoint, and I'm going to throw a fresh PowerPoint up here onto my monitor. And we're going to start just coming up with a very simple but attractive just Power BI layout that we're going to overlay our data visuals on. This is how I prefer to work with designing the best possible layouts in Power BI without having to manage all kinds of shapes and images. I'm a fairly aesthetic guy. I'd like to have full control over the way that everything looks. And then I just like to throw my data visuals on top of a carefully curated layout. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to open up a blank PowerPoint slide, and we're going to get to work. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to pick an attractive color scheme. And I know attractive is a, fairly vague and, obviously subjective concept. But what I mean by that is I want to decide first and foremost whether or not I'm going to create a light or white, colored Power BI theme, or if I want to create a dark theme. Most of the times in Power BI, people are either going to create a light theme or a dark theme so that they can create contrast. And that contrast is going to help pull a viewer's attention to areas of higher contrast or pops of color that can help us direct someone who is looking at our Power BI report, direct their attention right to the most important part of our data visuals. So, right now I'm making a decision. Do I want to go light? Do I want to go dark? I'm going to go dark just because, and I need to find a color scheme that is going to have a nice balance of warmer tones and cooler tones. And, the reason that we want cooler tones versus warmer tones is we want colors that are going to lend themselves to that contrast. We want colors that are going to kind of pop when people see them. People tend visually to be drawn towards warmer colors. So I want to have a nice balance of colors without getting too carried away with the number of colors that I choose. So I'm just going to use one of Power BI's built-in color palettes. I'm not going to spend too much time going through all of these. I'm just going to pick something that looks good. I kind of like this slice theme in PowerPoint, which I can access by going to Design, dropping down my menu. And what this is going to do is it's going to change the color palette that I'm working with here. Depending on which version of PowerPoint you're using, this annoying designer may pop up. We're just going to close out of that. We're going to open up our format background options, and I'm just going to turn off the background graphic. You'll notice there was like this little meteor shower or burst or something here. I'm just going to turn that off, and I'm going to focus my attention on my color palette, which has exactly what I tend to look for in a color palette. It's got a few ranges of cool tones, which by cool, I mean like blues. Think more, cold or, as I said, cool colors. And then there's colors that really contrast well with blue, like this orange and, kind of green tone here. So, I'm probably going to build a Power BI tool that uses a lot of like dark blue in the background, and I will probably use this kind of teal color or this orange color as my color pops in my data. So all I'm focused on right now is I've got my colors picked out. Now I just want to try to pick a color palette that's going to have a nice amount of contrast. So I'm going to keep this gradient in the background, and I'm going to just darken it up a little. So let's just, experiment a little bit, see what looks good. And I'm going to, right now, the direction of this gradient goes dark to light. I'm going to see what this looks like if I change the gradient to move diagonally dark to light. So let's give this a shot. I'm pretty happy with how that looks. The next thing I'm going to do, again, I want to keep things as simple as possible. I don't want to overthink my layout. I don't want to add a bunch of distractions to it or junk or clutter. So I'm just going to quickly add a square to the top right corner. I'm going to go ahead and drop this square down so that it's fairly small. I'm going to go ahead and remove the outline from it. I'm going to give this that kind of teal color that I commented on. Now I'm going to just copy that square, and I'm going to kind of drag across. I'm going to kind of line this up with the bottom of the square here in the edge of my canvas. I'm going to drop this down and make it about 0.03 in height. I'm going to copy that square again. I'm going to just pull it down here. Basically, I'm just making like a header and a footer for my report. I'm going to go ahead and give this a gradient as well. I don't want, again, too many aesthetic elements that are going to pull away. So if some of these are barely noticeable, I'm fine with that because they're not the purpose of the report. They're not where I want users' attention to go to right away. You'll notice with these blues that this is a little bit, I'm not immediately going to probably notice this down here if I'm looking at this report for the first time. I'm fine with that. Again, I want their attention to be up here where the title of the report is, and I want it here where the data is. So if my footer is, kind of blends in with the other blues, I'm fine with that. We're just going to leave it as is for now. I'm going to go ahead and give this report page a title. And I'm just going to write out Toy Company Sales 2023 Performance. I'm going to drag this into place and put it right there. Next, I'm going to go ahead and pick a different font to use than Century Gothic, and I'm going to use the Segway fonts that I know are already in Power BI. I'm going to pick Segway UI Lite for my Toy Company Sales, and for 2023 Performance, since this is really the focus of this page, I'm going to give it some extra emphasis by changing the font from Segway Light to Segway Black. And if you even want to punch up the font size a little bit, you've got plenty of room to do it there. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to insert an icon here, and I'm just going to use one of PowerPoint's built-in icons because this is, at the end of the day, I'm just going to pick a little toy icon. It's not very important. I'm just going to go ahead and drag the little teddy bear over here. I'm going to make it white, shrink it down a little bit, and just kind of put this up in the top corner to indicate this is my Toy Company Sales 2023 Performance. If you even want to add performance report, no problem. Last thing that I'm going to do, just to keep this design super short and super simple, is I'm just going to give myself credit as the Power BI developer. It's something that I also like to do on everything that I develop. I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down quite a bit. That light font is looking maybe a little bit difficult to read, so I'm going to go ahead and switch up my font just to the standard Segway UI font. And I'm going to go ahead and just drag that into the bottom right corner. Again, I'm okay using kind of this like teal color. Kind of blends in with the blue a little bit. It's not necessarily going to grab your attention as much as if I made it white. Notice how much more visible it is. Notice, how your attention to it varies as I hover over these colors. If I went dark blue, it would be almost impossible to see. If I went purple, there's maybe a little bit more contrast. If I go full white, there's quite a bit of contrast and it pulls your attention much more. But I'm just going to let it be teal so that someone can easily read it if they're interested in who built it. But otherwise, it's kind of blending into the background just a little bit. And this is literally all I need to do to get started. I've got a very, very basic layout that I can import into Power BI, and we're just going to start there. The next thing that I'm going to do, now that I've got my my layout designed in PowerPoint, is I'm going to go ahead and bring over the colors that I'm using in PowerPoint. My palette here, I'm going to go ahead and bring this palette over into Power BI where I can use it. Because you'll notice by default, if I open up a brand new PowerPoint PBI or Power BI PBIX file and go to Canvas background, I'm currently just working with Power BI's fairly atrocious default colors. And if I go up here to view and look through some of the other color palettes, there are maybe a few that might come somewhat close, and there are a few color palettes in here that are, not quite as bad as the default one. But these colors do not match up perfectly with what I have in my PowerPoint, layout. And the reason that we want these colors to sync perfectly is because, we're going to use some of the same colors in our PowerPoint color palette here in Power BI. So quickly, I'm just going to go ahead and customize the current theme. And these 8 colors are what I'm going to play with. These are what I'm going to swap out. And I'm going to hop back over into PowerPoint. And of course, these are the 8 colors that I'm going to be using over here in my theme. So the easiest way that I find to do this is just drop a square onto your canvas, and we're just going to copy it 8 times. I think that's 8. We'll be able to see here in just a second. I'm going to drag one square over here. I'm going to highlight everything. I'm going to go up here to arrange. I'm going to align. I'm going to distribute horizontally. And yep, you can see I got one too many squares. And now I'm going to arrange again, align, center. Whoops. My mistake, align middle. And now I'm just going to quickly go through and grab all of the colors from my theme palette. And I'm going to start with the first one here. And so for this square, I'm going to go over to color, go to more colors, and I'm going to grab this hex code. I'm going to hop back over to Power BI. I'm going to open up the first color, and I'm just going to copy and paste that hex code right there. Then I'm going to hop back over to PowerPoint and go to the next color, go to more colors, and I'm going to grab this one. I'm going to hop back over to Power BI, go to the next color, and just rinse and repeat until I'm done. More colors. So this is number 3. Let's go ahead and get number 4. And number 5. And number 6. I'm well aware that this is not the most exciting thing to watch, but I tried skipping over some of these parts in previous trainings, and I had people complain to me that they wanted to see me finish everything even if it's kind of tedious. So let's go ahead and grab our last color. Once we have this, we'll be done. There's all of our colors now copied over. We're going to hit apply, and you can see that our color palette in Power BI now matches exactly the color palette that we're working with over here in PowerPoint, which is just going to help us, keep our colors in sync as we move back and forth between our PowerPoint layout and our Power BI visuals. Because some of these colors are exactly what we're going to use in our bar charts and our line charts and all of our data visualization. So I'm going to go ahead and delete those squares. I no longer need them anymore. We've got our colors over here. Now it's time to hop into our data model. So now it's time to actually connect to our sales data and model this for better visualization purposes. Now, this is actually going to be a really easy Power Query walkthrough because this sales data set is already broken up into smaller tables. It's basically already normalized into a schema for us. So there's not a whole lot of additional manipulation and transformation that we need to do, although there are a couple of very deliberate things that I want to do to this data set that's going to make our lives easier down the road. So let's go ahead and head over to Transform Data to open up our Power Query editor. And since we have 4 different Excel files, what I'm going to do is I'm going to not connect to an Excel workbook. I'm actually going to connect to a folder that contains our data. So I'm going to go ahead and select folder as the thing that we want to connect to. I'm going to go ahead and hit connect. And I'm going to hit browse when it opens this option to enter a folder path. I'm going to quickly go to teaching. I'm going to open up my Udemy folders here. I'm going to open up our class for power pivoting. I'm going to go to lesson 15, my full walkthrough. And I'm going to go ahead and click on toy sales. And when I open this up, you can see all of the files that are currently in that location. We've got our 4 primary CSV or Excel tables that we're going to be using here: inventory, products, sales, stores. We've got a date table that I already loaded into that folder. And we have just some metadata, which just data dictionaries. So I'm fine with this. We're just going to connect to everything. We're going to hit transform data, and that's going to establish a connection to the folder where all of our data live. So I'm just going to go ahead and change the name of this query to source, and I'm going to disable the load here. I'm just going to right click and hit enable load. And what this is going to do is it is going to prevent this table from actually loading into the front end of Power BI. I'm going to go ahead and hit close and apply to demonstrate what I mean. And you can see I still don't have any data loaded into Power BI. So I'm going to head back to Transform Data in the Power Query editor. And I'm going to right click on source, and I'm going to reference that table. And from here, I'm going to connect to my date table first. So I'm going to call this query dates, and I'm going to click on binary. And there are 3 tables within my date Excel worksheet. I'm going to connect to my large date table by just clicking on table. In case I went too quickly, I just clicked on table here. I'm going to make the first row my headers, and I'm going to just go ahead and, if you'll recall, the sales data set only goes from 2022 through 2023. So I am going to add a number filter to my years here that restricts this date table to just those years. So I'm going to go ahead and just say that I want years that are greater than or equal to 2022. That should give me a date table that's a little bit more appropriate for this data than going all the way back to 1914. I'm going to head back up to my source table. I'm going to right click it and hit reference again. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in my inventory data. And I'm going to call this inventory. I'm going to go ahead and right click on my source again and connect to my products table by clicking on binary. Next, I'm going to bring in my sales table by clicking on the binary next to sales.csv. I'm going to change the name of that table to sales. I'm going to go up to my source table again, right click. This is the last table that we're going to bring in. I'm not going to bring over the data dictionaries. I'm going to go ahead and hit reference. And I'm going to click on the binary next to stores to bring in that stores CSV. I'm going to change the name to stores. And now I've got all of my data. Now, if you will remember, one of the things that I observed about these data sets when we first started looking at them is that logically, we're building a tool, a sales Power BI report tool, for someone who is going to be interested in how revenue is doing, how profit is doing, which products are we making the most money on. And if you'll look at our sales, quote unquote, fact table here, we have all of our transactions, we have the dates on which these transactions occurred, and we have the number of units that we sold, but we don't have any information about cost or sales that we can easily just roll up. There's no way to just sum up revenue currently in this data set. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to source some of this information from our product table, where we have product cost and product price. So before we load this data into Power BI, I'm going to make some additional changes to this using the Power Query Editor, which is such a useful tool for people who are building Power BI reports. So I'm going to head back to my sales table, and I'm going to merge this table with my product table. And merging is almost exactly the same as in SQL joining two tables. In fact, when we hit the merge button here, you can even see that we can specify what type of join we want to make between these two tables. If we want it to be an inner join, an outer join, left join, we can get really granular with the type of merge that we perform, just like we were writing a SQL query. But fortunately, we're not writing SQL, we're not writing any code. We just have a GUI here that we can work with. And in this interface, all I'm going to do is I'm going to specify that I want to merge this sales table with my products table. And of course, I want to use my product ID to commit that merge. And it says here the selection matches every row in the table. That's fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and just hit OK. And from my products table, I don't need a copy of product ID. I don't need product name. I don't need product category. We can just leave those fields in the product table and reference them through our table relationships, which I'll show you here in just a moment. All I'm interested in is product cost and product price. So let's go ahead and we don't need the product prefix. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring those in. Now I have product cost and product price in my sales table. Now we're not done yet. There's something else that we need to do here, because each of these transactions, the sale IDs in the sales table also tells us how many units were sold. And the units that were sold are not always one. Sometimes they're 3, sometimes they're 4, and presumably even higher. So, and what we need to do now is we need to come up with a total cost and total revenue and total profit column for each transaction here, which is super simple now. All we're going to do first is we're going to create a total cost column by multiplying these two columns together, units and product cost. So I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to select units, and I'm going to select product cost. I'm going to go up here to add column and go to standard, and I'm just going to multiply these two columns together. And we can call this total cost. If you want to check that this is working correctly, off the top of my head, it would probably be more useful to actually show our units from highest to lowest, so that we can just do a quick spot check here that, okay, everything is being multiplied correctly. Because you can see here for this transaction, 42,347, the total cost is $179.70 because we sold 30 units of a product that cost $5.99. Okay, that makes sense. Now we need a total revenue column, which is going to be units times product price. In other words, what we sold it for. So again, we're just going to hit units. We're going to hold down Control and select product price. We're going to go up here to add column, and we're going to multiply these together to get a total revenue column. And you can see total revenue is considerably larger than total cost. And now that we have total revenue and total cost for each transaction in our sales table, we can calculate profit by simply subtracting cost from revenue. So I'm going to first select total revenue, then I'm going to select total cost. I'm going to go up here to standard under add column, and I'm going to subtract. And now I have my total profit for all of these transactions. Once I'm done with that, based on what you want to do, personally, I don't think that I need to have product cost and product price here in this table anymore. I basically got from these two fields what I wanted from them. So I'm just going to leave them in the original products table, and I'm going to go ahead and remove them from my sales table. So you'll notice over here on the right, all of my transactions are saved. I can roll these back if I need to. Here is literally a step-by-step, run of every single transformation that I made on top of this table. And so now that my data model is pretty well ready to go, I'm just spot checking everything one more time. I'm going to head back to home in my Power Query Editor ribbon, and I'm going to close and apply and give Power BI a moment to think while it loads in my data model. You can see immediately that the sales table is taking the longest because it is by far the largest table in the entire data set. Once inventory, products, and stores turn on, those are almost instant. And I'm going to go over here very quickly and just spot check the number of rows in each table. Inventory is about 1,600, products super small, stores super small, and sales about 830,000 rows, which is what I anticipated. I'm going to go ahead and head over here to my relationship viewer, or to my actual model, and you can see that Power BI automatically picked up on all of those common ID columns and modeled everything for me. So that is good to go. The only thing that it didn't pick up on was the implied relationship between the date column in my dates table and the date column in my sales table. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab date from my sales table. I'm just going to hold that down and drag and drop it onto my dates table to create that relationship. So now my model is ready to go. Now we get to actually start having some fun with it by starting to design our Power BI report. So before I stop though, let's go ahead and bring in our background for this first page of our Power BI report. The next thing that we're going to do is just very quickly bring in our background image from PowerPoint and put it into Power BI. So I'm going to go ahead and open my PowerPoint again. And there are different ways that we can save this. So if we go over here to File, and if we go to Save As, we have the option to save this as a JPEG, as a PNG, or as a scalable vector graphics format, or SVG. There are pros and cons to doing it, any of the different ways. For JPEGs and for PNGs, you probably will need to take an extra step, and I've already recorded a video on this on my YouTube channel, explaining how you can increase the export resolution of your PowerPoint slides. JPEG and PNG, by default, when you export these images, when you export your PowerPoint slides as these image formats, they're going to be fairly small. Your text is going to look kind of blurry when you put the image into the background of your Power BI slide. But you can increase the export resolution to increase the size of the images that you're exporting from PowerPoint to just increase your resolution. Make sure that your images are so large that you're not going to lose any of that crispness in your text. However, if your image layouts are fairly simple, maybe just with some basic shapes and text, SVG is by design going to scale pretty much as large as you need it. So for this purpose, we are actually going to export this image as an SVG format that's not going to lose any crispness of text when we put it into the background of Power BI. It's going to be as large as we need it to be. So I'm going to save this as an SVG image. We're just going to call this background. It says that one already exists in that folder because I was experimenting with this a little while ago. We're going to go ahead and export this image as an SVG format. I'm going to head back over here into Power BI, and I'm going to format my report page. I'm going to go ahead and add something to my canvas background here. I'm going to go ahead and grab this Microsoft Edge HTML document. Actually is my SVG image. If I right click on it to see the properties, you can see that that format is my SVG that I just exported. I'm going to go ahead and open that. Immediately you're going to say, well, what gives? There's nothing here. And that's just because, again, sort of confusing reasons. In Microsoft Power BI, the background transparency by default is usually set to 100%. So we're just going to drag this down to 0. And there you go. There's our SVG image. It's just immediately there waiting for us. And now we can start actually, putting our data visuals into